Rising high above the Sonoran Desert, a massive skeleton of concrete and rusted rebar stands as a silent witness to a billion-dollar dream that turned into a desert nightmare. In the heart of Tucson, Arizona, a city known for its low-slung adobe architecture and sweeping mountain views, there sits an unfinished giant that was supposed to redefine the southwest skyline. It is a $1.1 billion skyscraper that came to a grinding halt at exactly 30 floors. If you look at it today, you can still see the yellow construction cranes frozen in time, their steel arms outstretched as if waiting for a delivery that will never arrive. The most chilling part of the story isn't the physical structure itself, but what happened in the boardrooms of the high-profile venture capital firms in early 2024. In a matter of 48 hours, the lead investors simply vanished. They didn't just stop payments. They shuttered their offices, deleted their digital footprints, and disconnected their phone lines, leaving the city of Tucson with a half-finished mountain of concrete that no one knows what to do with. Today, we are going inside the most expensive ghost project in Arizona history to figure out where the money went and why this mega project was doomed from the very first shovel in the ground. To understand why a skyscraper would fail so spectacularly in Tucson, you first have to understand the sheer ambition of the project. This wasn't just going to be an office building. It was marketed as a vertical city-state. It was designed to house 5-star hotel suites, luxury condos starting at $3 million, and high-tech laboratory spaces for the growing aerospace industry. The developers promised a rooftop oasis with a palm tree forest and infinity pools that would use advanced recycled water systems to thrive in the desert heat. On paper, it was a masterpiece of 2024 sustainability and modern design. It was supposed to be the Burj Khalifa of the West. But Tucson is not Dubai, and the economic winds of the desert are far more unpredictable than the developers realized. The trouble began with something called the substrata gamble. In the early phases of construction, geotechnical surveys suggested that the bedrock under the site was much deeper and more fractured than initially anticipated. Usually this would be the point where a sane developer scales back the height of the building, but the investors were already committed to the 30-story minimum to secure their tax breaks. Instead of scaling back, they decided to plow ahead with a revolutionary and incredibly expensive foundation system involving ultra-deep pressurized piles. This single decision ate through nearly $250 million of the budget before the first floor was even poured. By the time the building broke the surface of the ground, it was already 25% over budget. As the building rose toward the 20th floor, the atmosphere on the construction site began to change. Workers started noticing that shipments of high-grade steel were being delayed and replaced with lower-quality alternatives from unverified suppliers. The precision-engineered glass panels that were supposed to be the building's signature shimmer never arrived. Instead, the lower floors were boarded up with plywood. In the world of mega projects, these are the classic warning signs of a liquidity crisis. Someone was cutting corners to keep the project alive. In late 2023, a massive audit was quietly launched by one of the secondary lenders. They wanted to know why the construction costs were escalating while the progress on the upper floors was slowing down. What they found was a web of shell companies and offshore accounts that would make a spy novelist blush. It appeared that the lead investors were using the Tucson project as a capital sponge. They were funneling money intended for the skyscraper into a variety of high-risk speculative ventures in the tech sector. When those tech ventures began to collapse in early 2024, the sponge went dry. The skyscraper wasn't just a building anymore. It was a crime scene of financial mismanagement. Then came the legendary Vanish Friday. On a Tuesday in February 2024, the cranes were moving. The concrete trucks were lining the streets, and the site was buzzing with over 400 workers. By Friday morning, the gates were padlocked. The project managers couldn't reach the head office. When a local news team went to the corporate headquarters of the primary investment group in Scottsdale, they found the building empty. Even the furniture was gone. It was like the people behind the $1.1 billion project had never existed. They left behind a trail of unpaid contractors, angry city officials, and a 30-story concrete shell that was now a massive liability for the people of Tucson. Since the abandonment, the skyscraper has become a bizarre anomaly in the desert. Because it was never finished, the building has no skin. The concrete floors are open to the elements. In many climates, this would lead to rapid erosion, but in Tucson it creates a different problem. The extreme heat and the intense UV radiation are baking the exposed structural elements. The thermal expansion and contraction cycles are more aggressive in the desert than anywhere else. During the day, the temperature of the concrete can reach 140 degrees. At night, it drops to 60. This 80-degree swing every single day is putting immense stress on the joints that were never meant to be exposed for years on end. Engineers who have been hired by the city to assess the site have released some worrying reports. Without the envelope of the building to protect the interior, the high-performance concrete is starting to develop heat spalling. This is where the moisture trapped within the concrete expands so rapidly during the day that it blows little chunks of stone off the surface. If you walk near the base of the abandoned tower, you can see these concrete tiers scattered on the ground. It is the building literally falling apart because it cannot handle the desert sun without its protective glass. The social impact on Tucson has been devastating. This project was supposed to be the centerpiece of downtown revitalization. It was going to bring thousands of jobs and millions in tax revenue. Now it is a vertical vacuum. It sucks the life out of the surrounding blocks. Businesses that opened nearby in anticipation of the thousands of wealthy residents are now struggling to survive. The luxury restaurants and high-end boutiques are looking at a 30-story monolith of gray concrete. Instead of the promised hub of activity, it has become a symbol of broken promises and corporate greed. And then there is the legal mess. Because the investors vanished, ownership of the building is in a state of absolute chaos. There are over 60 different liens on the property from various contractors, banks, and utility providers. Every time a new developer expresses interest in buying the shell and finishing it, they realize they would have to spend years in court just to clear the title. In 2026, we are seeing more and more of these legal ghosts in the skyline. These are buildings that are physically salvageable but legally impossible to touch. They become permanent fixtures of the city, not because they can't be finished, but because the paperwork is more complex than the engineering. What would it actually take to finish the Tucson Giant? Current estimates suggest that another $600 million would be needed just to stabilize the structure and install the exterior cladding. But there is a bigger problem. Architecture and building codes move fast. The designs that were cutting edge in 2022 and 2023 are already becoming obsolete. The HVAC systems planned for the building were designed for a different energy market. The floor plans were created before the radical shift in office space needs that we are seeing in 2026. Basically, you would be paying 2026 prices to finish a 2022 building, and that math rarely works out for the bank. Inside the shell, the scene is haunting. There are pallets of materials that have been sitting on the 15th floor for over 2 years. Bags of cement have turned into solid blocks of stone from the humidity of the monsoon seasons. Tools were left where they dropped. In the lower lobby area, there is a giant architectural model of the finished tower, now covered in a thick layer of desert dust and spiderwebs. It is a miniature version of the dream that failed, sitting inside the skeleton of the nightmare it became. The story also highlights a flaw in how these mega projects are approved. The city was so desperate for the prestige of a skyscraper that they didn't do enough stress testing on the financial backgrounds of the investors. They saw the shiny brochures and the billion-dollar bank statements and said yes. But in the world of high finance, things aren't always what they seem. Many experts now believe the entire project was a Ponzi scheme of steel. It relied on constant new investment to pay off the old debts, and when the global interest rates spiked in 2024, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. Tucson is now left with a difficult choice. Do they let it stand as a monument to failure, or do they spend millions of taxpayer dollars to tear it down? Demolishing a 30-story skyscraper in the middle of a dense downtown area is a logistical nightmare. It would involve months of road closures and could potentially damage the foundations of nearby historic buildings. On the other hand, leaving it there is a constant drain on the city's image and a potential safety hazard. As the years go by, the risk of a non-structural event, like a fire in the abandoned construction materials or a piece of loose equipment falling from the upper floors, increases. The Tucson Giant has also become a focal point for researchers studying the phenomenon of stranded assets. These are investments that no longer provide a return because of changes in the market or the environment. In a world that is increasingly focused on decentralization and remote work, do we even need these massive vertical monuments anymore? This building might be a casualty of a shifting cultural paradigm. We are moving away from the era of the mega tower and toward more integrated, smaller-scale urban developments. The abandoned Tucson Tower is like a dinosaur that died mid-stride, caught in a world that outgrew it before it was even born. For the residents of Tucson, the building is a daily reminder of the Vanish Friday events. They remember the excitement when the project was announced. They remember when the first crane went up. And they remember the sudden, eerie silence that fell over the construction site when the power was cut. There is a sense of collective betrayal. This building was meant to be their pride and joy, and now it is a place that everyone avoids. It has changed the way people feel about the city center. It has introduced a note of skepticism into every new project proposal. Will it be another giant? People ask at city meetings. The disappearance of the investors remains one of the greatest financial mysteries of the decade. There have been sightings of the lead partners in various international tax havens, but no one has been able to serve them with legal papers. They managed to pull off a billion-dollar exit while leaving a 30-story physical evidence log behind. It's a level of audacity that is hard to wrap your head around. They essentially used the physical skyline of a major city as a prop in their financial theater. As we look toward the future, the fate of the Tucson skyscraper remains a huge question mark. There are talks of the city taking the property through eminent domain, but that would mean the city takes on all the liabilities and debts associated with the project. It is a poisoned chalice. No politician wants to be the one who bought a billion-dollar hole in the ground during an election year. So the building sits and waits. It waits for a hero developer with infinite pockets, or it waits for the desert to slowly reclaim the concrete. The engineering lessons being learned from this site are unique. Civil engineering students from across the country have visited Tucson to study the effects of prolonged exposure on an unfinished skyscraper. They are learning about passive structural degradation and the long-term impact of extreme heat on structural steel. In a way, the building has become a giant laboratory, providing data on things we never thought we'd need to know. We didn't need to know what happens to a 30-story tower abandoned for 3 years because we didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to leave one. Now we know. The construction cranes are perhaps the most tragic part. They were leased at a cost of tens of thousands of dollars per month. Now they are in legal limbo. The crane companies want their equipment back, but they can't get permission to enter the site, and they can't safely dismantle them without a full ground crew. So the cranes sit there, rusting in the wind. On windy nights, people in the downtown area say you can hear the crane arms moaning as they swivel slightly in the gusts. It is a haunting, metallic sound that echoes through the empty streets, a reminder that something up there is still alive, even if the project is long gone. If this building were in New York or London, it would have been finished by now. Someone would have seen the value in the location and the structure, but the Phoenix and Tucson markets are different. They rely on a different type of growth and a different set of economic drivers. The tragedy of the Tucson skyscraper is that it was built for a city that didn't exist yet, by people who didn't plan to stay. It was a projection of a future that never materialized. We see this often in the world of failing mega projects. There is a tipping point where a project becomes too expensive to finish, but too expensive to destroy. It enters a state of permanent limbo. The Tucson Tower is one of the clearest examples of this in the world today. It is a physical manifestation of a financial bubble. When the bubble burst, the air didn't just disappear. It left behind 30 floors of concrete and a mountain of lawsuits. As you look at the sunset tonight, imagine that skyscraper silhouetted against the purple and orange clouds of the Arizona sky. From far away, you can't see the rust or the plywood or the cracks in the concrete. You can only see the ambition. You can see the shape of what could have been. It's only when you get close, when you see the silence and the dust, that you realize the scale of the failure. $1.1 billion, thousands of hours of human labor, and millions of pounds of resources, all currently serving no purpose other than to provide a perch for the local hawks and a warning for the next generation of developers. The disappearance of the investors in 2024 will go down as a cautionary tale of the digital finance era. It showed us that billion-dollar commitments can evaporate as fast as a text message. It taught us that the sheer scale of a project is no guarantee of its success. In the history of Tucson, there are many stories of lost gold mines and hidden treasures in the mountains. The skyscraper at 30 floors is just the newest version of that legend. It's a lost treasure that everyone can see but no one can reach. So the next time you hear about a massive new project being announced in your city, look past the shiny renders and the celebrity architects. Look at the foundation, not just the physical foundation, but the financial one. Ask who the investors are and what their track record is. Because as the people of Tucson now know, $1 billion can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy integrity. And without integrity, even the largest skyscraper is just a very expensive pile of rocks in the sun. The desert is a patient place. It has seen civilizations rise and fall for thousands of years. To the desert, the Tucson Tower is just another ruin, no different from the ancient canals of the Hohokam or the abandoned mines of the 1800s. It is just another thing made by humans that wasn't built to last. For now, it remains the tallest not yet in the world, a 30-story question mark that Tucson might have to answer for a very, very long time. As the desert wind continues to blow through those empty concrete shells, we are left to wonder if we will ever see a crane move on that site again. Will someone find the Vanish Friday investors? Will the city find a way to clear the title? Or will we be standing here 10 years from now, looking at the same 30 floors, even more weathered and worn? The Tucson Giant is a story without an ending, a billion-dollar cliffhanger that perfectly captures the volatility of our modern age. It is the ultimate example of a failing megaproject. Not because of an engineering mistake, but because of a human one. And in the world of skyscrapers, human mistakes are often the hardest ones to fix.